Armed men stormed Mara Bennett's neighborhood salon and found the full-figured hairstylist standing in front of a locked supply closet, scissors clenched in her trembling hand. Inside was a terrified 8-year-old girl Mara swore she had never seen before that morning. Mafia Boss Luca Moretti accused Mara of kidnapping the child and gave her until midnight to reveal who had paid her. But the salon's security camera showed the girl entering alone through an alley door that had been sealed from the outside for 6 months, when Luca dragged the child into the light. Her hair shifted, revealing a crescent-shaped birthmark behind her ear, the same mark carried by every firstborn daughter in his family. His niece had supposedly drowned 4 years earlier. Then the girl whispered that someone inside Luca's mansion had sent her to Mara because the hairstylist was the only woman he would hesitate to kill. Before Mara could demand an explanation, a red laser appeared on the child's chest. Luca moved before anyone else understood. He struck Elena sideways and covered her with his body as the salon window burst above the waiting chairs. The shot buried itself in a framed photograph of Mara's late mother. Glass rained over the black and white tiles. "Back room," Luca ordered. Mara did not obey him. She caught Elena beneath the arms and pulled the child behind the reception counter, while Luca's men returned fire toward the roof across the alley. Her cream blouse snagged on a drawer handle. She tore it free and kept moving. Terror made her breath shallow, but her hands were steady. They had been steady through wedding mornings. Chemotherapy shaves, and the night her mother died upstairs, they would be steady now. Luca rose in one controlled motion. At 34, he carried power without haste, broad shoulders under a charcoal suit. Black hair swept back, a short dark beard, and dense black and grey tattoos rising from his open collar and crossing his hands. He never raised his voice, that made his fury worse. "Marco, clear the alley." "Thomas' basement." He looked at Mara. "You stay where I can see you. Someone just shot at a child, and you're still threatening me. Someone sent her to your locked door." Elena clung to Mara's waist. Her dark hair looked almost black, but at the roots Mara saw warm chestnut. The ends had been colored repeatedly, roughly, and too often. A faint chemical burn traced the child's hairline. "Who dyed your hair?" Mara asked. The girl stared at Luca and went silent. Another shot struck brick outside. Luca crossed the room, lifted the fallen steel security shutter by hand, just high enough for his men to drag a wounded guard inside. Then let it slam down. Blood darkened Marco's left sleeve. Luca pressed a towel to it and ordered pressure, not panic. Mara pointed toward the shampoo stations. "There is a service stair under the third chair. It connects to the basement next door." Luca's eyes narrowed. The sealed building. It used to be Rosalia Beauty Academy. My mother trained there. The city closed the alley entrance, not the interior passage. That explained the impossible camera image. Elena had not crossed the sealed exterior door. She had emerged from the old academy's basement vestibule and entered through the inner alley frame caught by Mara's camera. Luca sent Thomas ahead. The guard returned 2 minutes later and said the passage was clear, though fresh mud marked the academy steps. "We're leaving," Luca said. "Elena leaves with me," Mara replied. He studied her youthful round face, the chestnut curls escaping her loose updo, and the stubborn set of her full lips. 6 months earlier, she had kept his mother breathing during an allergic reaction, then refused his money and his protection. Luca had never forgotten a debt. He had also never met a woman who could make refusal sound like a judgment. "Until I know who brought her here," he said. "You are part of the threat. Then arrest me or trust me. Don't pretend dragging me away is protection," Elena whispered. Bianca said he would be angry. She said angry was better than dead. Luca crouched, keeping his hands visible. "Bianca who?" "She cut the boards. She told me to run through the school and find the lady with red scissors." Mara glanced at the scissors still in her hand. Red enamel coated the handles, a gift from her mother. She set them on the counter so Elena would stop looking at them like a weapon. Outside, an engine roared. Luca pulled Mara down as a car rammed the shutter. Metal bowed inward. His men fired through the lower gaps. The attackers were not trying to retrieve Elena. They were trying to erase everyone who had seen her. Luca made the decision his family had avoided for 4 years. He removed his signet ring, pressed it into Elena's palm, and closed her fingers around it. "You stay with Mara," he said, "and Mara stays with me. I don't belong to you," Mara said. No, his gaze settled on the ruined photograph behind her. "But whoever sent that bullet believes you do." The lights went out. In the darkness, Thomas shouted from below that someone had locked the basement exit from the academy side. Emergency lamps washed the salon in dim red. Luca's men braced the shutter while Mara led Elena past the shampoo basins. She dropped to one knee beside the third chair and pulled a brass latch hidden under its pedestal. A narrow stair opened beneath it, smelling of wet concrete and old perm solution. "That passage was condemned," Luca said. "Condemned does not mean forgotten." She descended first, despite his order. The stair ended at a basement door secured by a chain from the far side. Mara reached through the gap with a tint brush, caught the loose end, and drew it toward her until Thomas could cut it. Her knowledge was ordinary, Luca realized, but exact. She understood spaces built for working hands. They crossed beneath the abandoned academy, dust-covered, overturned practice heads and rusted dryer chairs. Fresh footprints led from a small storage room to Mara's building. Inside lay a child's blanket, an empty water bottle, and strips of plywood cut from the boarded alley wall. Elena pointed to the blanket. "Bianca waited here. She was bleeding." "Where did she go?" Luca asked. "She said she had to lead the bad men away." Mara examined Elena under the beam of her phone. The black color was recent, but beneath it she found 3 older bands: brown, copper, then black again. Whoever hid the child had changed her appearance every few months. Around several strands clung pale lavender fibers from inexpensive salon neck paper. "Rosalia paper," Mara said. "The academy had its own brand. They stopped making it after the school closed, but a warehouse bought the remaining cartons." Luca looked at Thomas. "Which warehouse?" Mara answered first. "Bellwether Cosmetics on Carson. I buy discontinued rollers there." One of Luca's phones rang. His uncle Vittorio demanded to know why gunfire had erupted on protected territory. Luca said only that an old debt had surfaced. He did not mention Eleanor. When the call ended, Mara asked why he had told any family member where he was. "He already knew the block," Luca said. "Knowing the block isn't the same as hearing you're alive." The rebuke landed because it was correct. Luca had called Vittorio after Marco's boat vanished 4 years earlier. His uncle had organized divers, comforted Luca's mother, and placed a hand on Luca's shoulder when a child's red coat washed ashore. Trust had become reflex. They emerged into the academy's rear courtyard. A black SUV waited beyond a service gate. Marco, his arm bandaged, insisted he could drive. Luca ordered him to a doctor and put Thomas behind the wheel instead, at Bellwether. The night manager recognized the lavender paper. A woman named Bianca Russo had purchased a carton every 3 months for 4 years, paying cash and collecting it with supplies ordered for a private residence on Lake Arno Road. The last pickup had been that morning. She had seemed frightened and left behind a broken phone. Luca sealed the phone in an evidence pouch. Mara noticed dark dye beneath the cracked case and a crescent of blood near the charging port. Elena saw it and began to shake. Bianca said, "The house heard everything," she whispered. "She took the little card out before we ran. The phone's memory card was missing." Luca asked the manager for invoices, but the computer showed that every transaction associated with Bianca had been deleted 12 minutes earlier using an administrator login. Mara turned toward the glass storefront. Across the parking lot, a man in a delivery jacket watched them from a van. She recognized him not as a customer, but as the driver who had delivered Luca's mother's hair products to her salon twice that month. She spoke without moving her lips. The van blue cap. Luca did not look. He took Mara's hand as though intimacy, not danger, had drawn him closer. His thumb rested against her pulse. "Walk Elena to the stockroom." The van driver reached inside his jacket. Luca spun, shoved Mara and Elena behind a display, and fired once through the man's shoulder before the weapon cleared cloth. Thomas captured him alive. The attacker carried no identification. In his pocket was a current photograph of Mara leaving her apartment, and on the back someone had written a time. 11:40 p.m. Mara checked the wall clock. They had 47 minutes. Luca refused to wait for midnight. They left Bellwether through the loading bay, while Thomas questioned the wounded attacker under guard. Mara rode beside Elena in the rear of the SUV. Holding the child's cold hands, Luca sat in front, issuing clipped instructions to close roads around Lake Arno without explaining why, if Bianca risked herself to move Elena. Mara said, "The house on the invoice may already be empty. It may also be where she returned, and the person who erased those records knows we're coming." Luca looked back. "Do you have a safer address?" She did not. That silence cost her later. Lake Arno Road lay 30 minutes north beneath a steady autumn rain. The residence was a former convalescent home hidden behind pines. Owned by a Moretti charitable trust, its gates stood open. No lights burned. Inside, they found 4 small bedrooms, a locked classroom, and a salon chair bolted to the floor. Boxes of Rosalia neck paper filled a cupboard. Elena would not cross the threshold. Mara stayed with her while Luca and Thomas searched. She asked only questions a child could answer. Which shampoo smelled familiar where she sat? Who touched her hair? Elena pointed to a bottle of cheap black dye and said Bianca always apologized. Another woman, Aunt Celeste, watched through a camera and punished Bianca if the roots showed. Mara opened the color ledger beside the sink. The formulas were written in professional shorthand, but the dates formed a 4-year record. Every entry aligned with a quarterly visit, listed under initials B. R. A final note read, "Remove color Friday, prepare for transfer." "Transfer where?" Luca asked. Elena whispered, "The cold place by the water." A thump sounded above them. They found Bianca Russo in the attic behind a false panel, conscious but weak from a cut along her ribs. She had doubled back after drawing the first pursuers away, hoping to recover the memory card she had hidden. Luca's men treated her wound while she told them the truth in fragments. Vittorio Moretti had ordered Elena taken after Marco announced he would remove Moretti shipping routes from family control. Marco died in the staged boating accident. Elena survived because Bianca, then a junior housekeeper, begged to care for her. Vittorio kept the girl alive as leverage against Luca's mother in case she challenged the succession. "Who sent Elena to Mara?" Luca asked. "Your mother," Bianca said. "Rosa learned the child was alive 3 weeks ago. She contacted me through salon appointments because Vittorio monitors her calls." Mara's booking cards were the only messages that entered the mansion without his men reading them. Mara remembered Rosa requesting unusual appointment times, then cancelling. The times were coordinates on an old color wheel used by Rosalia students. Mara had assumed grief made the older woman forgetful. Bianca reached beneath the attic insulation and produced a tiny memory card wrapped in foil. It held audio she had recorded over 4 years, including Vittorio's orders and images of the transport ledger. It was not enough by itself. A skilled lawyer could challenge editing and authorship, but combined with Bianca alive and the original color ledger, it could break the official story. Mara made her mistake because Bianca was fading and the house felt like a grave with open doors. She insisted they take Bianca's personal phone as well, believing its messages to Rosa would protect both women. Luca warned that it might be tracked. Mara removed the battery and said they needed the contact history. He yielded because he had threatened her twice in one night and could not bear to silence the first person who had defended Elena. They drove toward a private clinic controlled by Luca. 10 minutes later, 3 vehicles appeared behind them. On the rain-black road, the phone had contained a secondary tracking cell sealed beneath its case, independent of the battery. Thomas swore and accelerated. Luca looked at Mara once without triumph. "You were right to save the messages," he said. "You were wrong to bring the device." Mara held his gaze. "Then help me correct it." She slid down the window and threw the phone onto the flatbed of a passing landscaping truck. 2 pursuing cars followed the false signal. The third stayed with them. Ahead, the clinic gates began to close. The remaining SUV struck their rear quarter panel, spinning them across the wet road. Elena screamed. Metal folded around the back wheel, and their vehicle stopped sideways beneath the gate. Then Luca saw the attacker step out wearing a Moretti family security badge. The badge belonged to Carlo Vezzi, deputy chief of security at the Moretti mansion. Luca had promoted him 2 years earlier. Carlo raised his weapon. Luca fired through the cracked windshield, forcing him behind the engine block. Clinic guards returned fire from the gatehouse. Mara unfastened Elena, crawled through the rear hatch, and pulled the child along the ditch. Her left knee struck gravel hard enough to tear her skirt and skin, but she did not stop until concrete covered them. Bianca could not crawl. Thomas, bleeding from a cut above his eye, dragged her clear while Luca held the road. Carlo retreated when a second clinic team arrived. His vehicle left one deep tire track and a shattered side mirror before disappearing into the rain. Inside, a physician stitched Bianca's wound and confirmed no organs were damaged. Mara's knee required cleaning and a compression wrap, not heroics. She limped afterward and accepted it. Luca had glass cuts along his jaw and one shallow graze across his right forearm, just below the tattoos. He refused pain medication until Elena watched the nurse bandage him. "You can be hurt," she said. "Everyone can," Uncle Vittorio said. "You couldn't." The room went still. Elena explained that Vittorio visited behind smoked glass. She recognized his voice because he told bedtime stories through a speaker, always ending with the same warning. If she ran, Luca would kill Bianca and blame the child. Luca's face remained cold, but his injured hand closed until blood touched the bandage. Mara sat beside him. "If you frighten her now, his lie wins." He opened his hand. At 1:20 a.m., Thomas reported that Carlo had used an active family badge and a clinic access code changed the previous week. Only Luca, Vittorio, and the mansion's security office possessed the update. Luca ordered Carlo's badge cancelled, then stopped himself from ordering Vittorio arrested. The family council controlled internal judgment. Acting without proof would divide the soldiers and expose Elena. "Your rules protect him," Mara said. "Tonight they do, and tomorrow? Tomorrow I decide whether the rules deserve to survive." The memory card contained 17 audio clips. Bianca identified her own voice and Vittorio's, but the clearest recording mentioned only the girl and the route. The original transport ledger remained at the cold place by the water, a Moretti refrigerated warehouse where Elena had been moved during inspections. Bianca knew the ledger carried Vittorio's handwritten authorizations. Because he refused to trust digital records, she had photographed 2 pages, but the paper book could prove custody, payments, and dates. Luca's attorney warned that the council would meet at midnight the next day. Vittorio had already invoked an emergency succession clause, claiming Luca's reckless street war threatened the waterfront alliance. If Luca failed to appear, authority would pass temporarily to Vittorio's son Adrian. If Elena appeared, as Marco's surviving child, she could block the transfer, but making an 8-year-old the center of a mafia council would expose her to every faction. Luca ordered a DNA test using Elena's cheek swab and a stored sample from Marco's military medical record. Results would take 12 hours with a trusted laboratory. Mara objected when guards tried to move Elena to another room. "Ask her." Luca did. Elena chose the room beside Bianca and asked Mara to stay until she slept. Luca watched Mara loosen the child's damaged braid, work conditioner through the dyed knots, and avoid the burned skin. She did not promise that everything would be fine. She promised only that Elena would know before anyone touched her, and that locked doors would open from her side. Later, Luca found Mara alone in the corridor, leaning against the wall to spare her knee. He offered his arm. She ignored it. "You accused me before you asked her name," she said. "I saw my dead niece in a locked room. You saw a frightened child and chose ownership over care." He accepted the blow. "My brother trusted the family. I trusted the man who killed him." Mara finally took his arm, not as forgiveness, but because walking hurt. "Then don't ask Elena to trust you because of blood. Earn it because of what you do next." At the end of the corridor, Rosa Moretti stepped from an elevator under guard. She saw Elena through the glass and covered her mouth. Before she could enter, Luca's attorney intercepted a council message. Vittorio had announced that Mara Bennett was Elena's kidnapper and placed a $2 million reward on delivering her alive. By dawn, Mara's photograph was everywhere in the underworld. Luca could suppress newspapers and police tips for a few hours, but bounty hunters did not require proof. He offered to move Mara overseas. She refused before he finished. "My staff will open the salon at 9 unless I call them," she said. "My apartment is above it. My life is not luggage. You can ship away. Your life is currently priced by your uncle. Fix the source." Rosa sat with Elena while Mara questioned her about the cancelled appointments. 3 weeks earlier, Rosa had seen a current photograph of Elena in Vittorio's study. Partly hidden beneath a shipping manifest, she could not copy it without alerting a camera. So she used the Rosalia color wheel she remembered from Mara's salon to pass Bianca, a sequence of meeting coordinates through appointment times. The final instruction sent Elena to the abandoned academy beside Mara because Mara had once told Rosa about the interior passage. "Why me?" Mara asked. Rosa looked toward Luca. "Because my son paid your building's taxes after you saved me, and you made him reverse the payment. He has not allowed anyone to refuse him twice. I believed hesitation would buy Elena seconds. It bought her 1 bullet and his body in front of it," Rosa replied. Luca did not turn the exchange into gratitude. He told his mother that secrecy had placed Mara in danger and that no one would use her without consent again at 8:05 a.m. The DNA laboratory confirmed a 99.98% avuncular relationship between Luca and Elena. Thomas brought a printed certificate and retained the encrypted original with the laboratory director. It established who Elena was, not who had taken her. Bianca woke and identified the refrigerated warehouse, Pier 9 Cold Storage, officially leased to Adrian Moretti's seafood company. The original transport ledger was kept in a floor safe inside the old foreman's office. She knew the combination pattern, but not the current final digits. Luca proposed entering with 20 soldiers. Mara shook her head. "Vittorio wants you to raid it. He'll call it an attack on Adrian's legitimate company, and the council will remove you before midnight. Then, what do you suggest?" Mara remembered the hair product driver who had watched Bellwether. His route included the mansion and likely the warehouse. Salon distributors collected damaged products for credit every Thursday. Today was Thursday. She called her assistant June from a secure clinic line and learned that a distributor truck was scheduled at the salon at 10. Mara asked June to close the shop, send everyone home, and leave 1 sealed return carton by the rear door. She did not explain more. June heard the strain in her voice and obeyed. The plan was simple. Thomas would intercept the legitimate truck away from the salon, verify the driver, and place a small camera inside the return carton. The warehouse staff would carry it through normal receiving. No hacking, no armed breach. They needed only to see whether the foreman's office was occupied and whether the ledger still existed. Luca disliked using Mara's business. She reminded him that Vittorio had already used it first. The carton entered Pier 9 at 10:42. Its camera showed pallets, 3 guards, and Carlo Vezzi speaking with Adrian Moretti. Then workers carried the box past the foreman's office. Through its partly open door, Mara saw a woman's handbag on the desk and a familiar bottle of black dye beside it. "Celeste," Elena whispered from across the room. "She hurts Bianca when my hair grows brown." The camera turned as the carton moved. A woman in a white coat entered the office. Mara recognized her as Celeste Ward, a former licensing inspector who had tried to close Mara's salon 2 years earlier for violations that did not exist. Celeste had professional access to beauty suppliers and municipal building records. She had known the academy passage. Before the camera lost sight of the room, Carlo opened the floor safe. Inside lay a thick red ledger. They had located the proof, but Mara's plan had also failed in one critical way. Celeste looked directly at the return carton, lifted the lid, and found the camera. She smiled into it and held up a pair of red-handled scissors taken from Mara's salon. "Come before sunset," she said, "or June Bennett loses 1 finger for every hour you wait." June was Mara's cousin, as well as her assistant. She had gone back for the salon's appointment book after closing and vanished before Thomas's men reached the block. Celeste had anticipated Mara's reliance on routine because she understood salons almost as well as Mara did. Mara blamed herself once, sharply, then stopped. Guilt that did not produce action was a luxury June could not use. Luca wanted to exchange territory for the hostage. His attorney warned that any written surrender before the council vote would give Vittorio control of 3 docks and the cold storage route. Enough to move weapons without Moretti oversight. Mara studied the warehouse plan and Bianca's photographs instead. The images revealed that the red ledger recorded weekly transfers between Lake Arno and Pier 9. One line partly visible carried the notation RM authorization. Luca assumed it meant Rosa Moretti and went pale with fresh suspicion. Bianca corrected him. RM was your father. Renato. The truth changed the room. Renato Moretti had ordered Elena removed for 48 hours to force Marco to abandon his plan to separate the shipping companies from the family. Vittorio turned the temporary abduction into murder and captivity after Marco refused. Renato discovered the deception too late, suffered a stroke, and died without exposing his own crime. Vittorio kept the original ledger because it gave him leverage over Luca. Proving Vittorio's guilt would also prove the former boss had ordered the kidnapping. Luca stood at the clinic window for a long time. His father had taught him that family authority required obedience. The same authority had treated a child as pressure. If the council sees the ledger, he said, the Moretti name may lose every alliance. Mara faced him. If they don't see it, Elena learns your name matters more than what happened to her. I know, do you? Because this is the moment men like you usually call silence protection. He turned. Restraint held his face still, but grief darkened his eyes. My father began it. I will end it, even if I end the family with it. The promise cost him before Mara trusted it. Luca dictated a statement transferring temporary control of the waterfront cruise to a neutral captain if he failed to return by midnight. He also recorded a confession that his father had authorized Elena's initial abduction, based on Bianca's testimony, and sent it under seal to 3 council elders. He could no longer bury the shame without exposing his own lie. Their rescue plan used Vittorio's certainty that Luca would arrive with force. Luca sent visible vehicles toward the main gate while Mara, wearing dark trousers, low boots, and a borrowed coat over her bandaged knee, entered through the employee side with the legitimate distributor driver. She carried no weapon. A rolling case contained color supplies and a medical kit. At 5:18 p.m., Celeste met her inside the processing corridor. June sat tied to a chair behind a glass partition. Frightened but uninjured, the scissors, Mara said. Celeste displayed them. You built a reputation on making women recognizable. I built mine on making one child disappear. Which of us was better? Mara saw black dye stains on Celeste's cuffs and fresh adhesive beneath one thumbnail. She also noticed condensation on the office glass. The floor safe had been moved into a refrigerated room, probably to protect it during the expected raid. You were never better, Mara said. You had locks. Celeste ordered her searched, then exchanged June for Mara. June limped through the side door toward Thomas. Mara allowed her own wrists to be tied because one hostage leaving was a victory. Then Celeste opened Mara's rolling case and found only ordinary salon products. Where is the tracker? There isn't one. That was true. Mara had brought something more useful, a bottle of clear chelating rinse used to strip mineral buildup from hair. As Celeste leaned close, Mara knocked it into the industrial dye basin and stepped on the rinse pedal. Foam surged across the tile. Celeste slipped. Mara drove her shoulder into the woman's knees and ran despite the pain in her own. She reached the glass partition controls, released 2 locked employee doors, and let Luca's small team enter from the side. No army appeared at the main gate. Vittorio's defenders had concentrated there for nothing. Carlo fired from the foreman's office. A bullet struck Luca high in the left shoulder. He stayed upright long enough to push Mara behind a steel column, then dropped to one knee. Adrian seized the red ledger from the refrigerated room and fled toward the loading docks. Celeste, dazed but conscious, hit an emergency control. Heavy freezer doors began closing between Mara and Luca. Mara could chase the ledger or remain with the wounded man who had risked his power for Elena. She jammed her rolling case into the door track, keeping it open long enough for Thomas to pull Luca through. Adrian escaped with the ledger. Luca's wound passed through muscle without striking bone or artery, but the doctor ordered his left arm immobilized. They had lost the original ledger, and Sunset bled across the river with less than 6 hours before the council vote. Mara sat in the ambulance while her knee throbbed and Luca's blood dried on her borrowed coat. I chose you over the book, she said. You chose a living person over paper. The paper could protect Elena. Then we find another way. You don't apologize for refusing to let me die. It was the first tenderness he offered, without trying to control its result. Mara touched 2 fingers to his uninjured hand. He did not close his grip around them. He waited until she chose to leave them there. Celeste had been captured, but she demanded immunity and denied knowing where Adrian would take the ledger. Carlo was dead after firing at clinic guards during his escape. June confirmed that Vittorio had visited the warehouse before the exchange and ordered Adrian to bring the red insurance to the council. That gave them a narrow path. Vittorio needed the ledger intact. Without it, he could deny Bianca's accusations. With it, he could threaten Luca into withdrawing. He would carry the proof into the Moretti mansion himself. Mara returned to her salon at 8:10 p.m. under guard, not to hide but to recover Rosa's cancelled appointment cards and the Academy color wheel. The block had gone dark. Shop owners waited behind locked doors, angry that armed strangers had claimed their street. Mara spoke to them one by one. She did not ask them to fight. She asked for the delivery times, license plates, and faces they had seen during the 6 months the Academy passage was being reopened. Ordinary memory produced a map no surveillance system held. The grocer remembered Celeste buying water every second Tuesday. The barber saw Carlo changing plates on a grey sedan. A food truck owner had receipts from serving the same 4 guards near Lake Arno. Together, their accounts corroborated Bianca's timeline and showed organized custody, but not Vittorio's direct command. Inside the salon, Mara found one more fact. The red scissors Celeste had stolen were not hers. The screw was brass, while Mara's set used stainless steel. Celeste had displayed a copy, suggesting she intended to leave it with June's body and frame Mara for violence if the exchange failed. Luca wanted Mara away from the council. She refused. The reward is still on me. If I disappear, Vittorio controls what my absence means. The council chamber is not a courtroom. Stop treating it like one. Make it choose what kind of family it serves at 10:30. The laboratory director, Bianca, Rosa, Elena, June, and 3 neighborhood witnesses were moved separately toward the mansion. Thomas retained the memory card. Luca carried no long gun because of his shoulder. His pistol remained holstered on his right side. Mara wore a burgundy wrap dress from the salon's emergency wardrobe, chosen because it allowed movement without pressing her injured knee. Her hair was pinned high again. She refused to arrive looking like Vittorio's fugitive. Before they left, Luca stood beneath the broken photograph of Mara's mother. When this ends. If you want me gone from this block, I will go, and if I don't. His jaw tightened with the emotion he refused to display. Then I learn how to enter without armed men at 11:22 p.m. They reached the Moretti mansion. The council elders were already seated. Vittorio stood beside Adrian at the long walnut table. A red ledger rested before him. Elena was not with Luca's group. Her transport vehicle had arrived empty, its driver unconscious, and Rosa's guard phone lay broken on the rear seat. Vittorio reacted too quickly. The hairstylist has hidden her again. Mara heard certainty where surprise should have been. Luca heard it too, but neither challenged him yet. Vittorio had expected Elena to vanish. He did not know whether the attempt had succeeded. Thomas left the chamber to examine the vehicle. The driver had been struck from behind, near the mansion's south gate. The rear child lock had been disabled, with Luca's signet ring, which Elena still carried. Muddy footprints led away from the open door toward the estate's abandoned orangery. A second set, larger and deeper, followed. Luca started toward the exit. 2 council guards blocked him under the emergency succession rule. If he abandoned the chamber before the vote, Vittorio would claim the chair at once and command every guard on the estate. Mara touched Luca's uninjured arm. Stay. If he becomes boss, no room here is safe. You can barely run, then I won't waste time running in the wrong direction. Thomas accompanied her through the rain. The orangery stood beyond clipped hedges, its glass roof cracked and its interior overgrown. Mara found a strip of lavender neck paper tied around a rose stem. Elena had torn it from the clean cape Mara wrapped around her at the clinic. Another strip marked the fork toward the potting rooms. The child had remembered Mara's promise. Locked doors would open from her side. When the ambush stopped the vehicle, she used the signet ring like a wedge in the damaged child lock lever, escaped, and left a trail with the only material in her pocket. Mara followed slowly enough to notice what the pursuer missed. One marker pointed left, But crushed moss continued right. Elena had planted a false trail. They found Salvatore Greco, the neutral Captain Luca had named as temporary waterfront commander, searching the left corridor with a pistol. His betrayal explained how Vittorio knew the transport route and clinic departure window. Luca's precaution had become the contingency Vittorio needed. Salvatore saw them reflected in a glass pane and fired. Thomas pulled Mara behind a stone planter, taking a graze along his ribs. He returned one shot, but Salvatore moved into the potting room where Elena hid. A direct exchange could hit the child. Mara studied the old iron irrigation valves. Her mother had once styled weddings in the orangery and complained that the ceiling pipes leaked rusty water. The main handle remained beside the boiler door. She crawled behind the planters, favoring her wrapped knee, and turned it. Water thundered through overhead pipes. Sprinkler heads burst to life, striking dry soil and glass. Salvatore flinched when cold water hit his face. Elena kicked a tray of clay pots into his ankles and ran. Mara rose between them. Salvatore grabbed her coat and pressed the pistol against her ribs. She trapped his wrist with both hands, not trying to overpower him, only forcing the muzzle down while Thomas crossed the room. The shot broke tile. Thomas struck Salvatore once behind the ear and disarmed him. Elena ran into Mara's arms. Mara's knee gave way and they sank together onto the wet floor. "You left a trail," Mara said, breathless. "And a wrong trail," Elena replied. That was the clever part. Thomas bound Salvatore and called the mansion. Salvatore refused to confess, but his phone contained a message ordering him to take Elena to the Riverside Gate before 11:35. The sender appeared as a prepaid number. It proved the ambush had been coordinated, though not by whom. Back in the council chamber, Vittorio opened the red ledger to the page bearing Renato Moretti's authorization. Luca's father ordered the child removed, he announced. Luca has brought a frightened girl here to disguise his own blood's crime and keep power. Luca did not deny it. He placed his recorded statement on the table and told the elders that Renato had begun the abduction. The admission stunned the room because Vittorio expected shame to keep Luca obedient. "My father forfeited the right to be defended by silence," Luca said. "So does any man who continued his crime." Vittorio's control slipped for one visible second. Mara entered at 11:51, with Elena holding her hand. Water darkened Mara's coat, and blood from her reopened knee marked the hem of her burgundy dress. Luca crossed the chamber, but stopped before touching her. She nodded, once granting permission. His right hand settled at her waist, steadying rather than claiming. Elena looked at Vittorio. His face was older than the silhouette behind smoked glass, but his voice made her recoil. "That's the man who said Uncle Luca would kill Bianca," she whispered. Vittorio reached inside his coat. Every guard drew a weapon. He removed not a gun, but a small remote, with his thumb resting on its button. He said the original recordings and transport records were stored beneath Pier 9, beside enough fuel to erase the warehouse and everyone still inside it. Celeste, he claimed, had never been taken to the clinic at all. Luca knew Celeste was in custody. Vittorio did not. His threat revealed that he had lost contact with his own people and that the remote was probably a bluff. Then Adrian looked at his father and said, "Pier 9 has no fuel line beneath the office. I removed it last winter." Vittorio pressed the button anyway. Nothing happened. He overturned the council table, seized Elena by the arm, and dragged her toward the private corridor as his remaining loyal guards opened fire into the ceiling. In the confusion, the red ledger slid across the floor and stopped at Mara's feet. Mara snatched the ledger and pushed it beneath the heavy base of a council chair before following. She could not outrun Vittorio, but she knew where he intended to go. Rosa's coded appointment cards had mapped the mansion using the old Rosalia color wheel. The final cancelled time pointed not to the salon, but to a service stair beneath the east wing, the route Rosa had planned for Elena if Bianca ever reached the estate. Luca saw Mara turn away from the obvious corridor and trusted her without demanding an explanation. Thomas stayed behind to secure the council and the ledger. Adrian ordered his father's wavering guards to lower their weapons. For the first time in his life, Luca allowed another person to own the decisive direction. The east stair spiraled below the mansion into a disused wine passage ending near the river. Vittorio was taking Elena to the riverside gate named in Salvatore's message, where a boat could reach disputed territory before dawn. Mara descended first until her injured knee buckled. Luca caught her with his right arm, his left still bound against his chest. "Go," she said. "I'll follow. We arrive together." "That is sentiment, not strategy." He looked at her with cold, wounded clarity. "No, you know the passage. I can shoot together is strategy," they continued, slower but silent, ahead. Elena asked Vittorio why he had kept her alive. His answer carried along the stone, "Because a living heir is worth more than a dead child, not to Bianca." Bianca was weak. She opened the door. At the final bend, Mara saw an old salon mirror leaning against the wall, discarded after a mansion renovation. She angled it with her foot until it reflected the dock passage. Vittorio stood behind Elena with a pistol at her shoulder. One guard waited by the outer gate. Rain blew through the opening. A motorboat idled beyond. Luca could not fire without risking Elena. Vittorio demanded the council seal, Luca's territory codes and safe departure. Luca offered something larger. "Release her, and I renounce the succession, the docks, the cruise. The chair none pass through me." Vittorio laughed. "Without the chair, you're only a wounded man. Then you have no reason to fear me." The offer unsettled him because his entire plan assumed Luca valued inherited power above truth. Luca removed the signet chain from his neck, the formal seal he had taken after giving Elena his ring, and placed it on the floor. "Kick it forward," Vittorio ordered. Luca did. Elena watched the seal slide past her shoe. Mara watched the mirror. The dock guard leaned down to retrieve it, briefly turning his weapon away. Mara pushed the mirror with both hands. It crashed flat across the passage. Not onto anyone, but the noise made Vittorio jerk toward her. Elena dropped as Mara had taught her behind the salon counter. Luca fired once with his right hand. The bullet struck Vittorio's gun arm. The weapon fell. The dock guard aimed at Luca, but Adrian appeared through the outer gate and ordered him to stand down. When the guard hesitated, Adrian threw the boat keys into the river. Vittorio lunged for Elena with his uninjured arm. Mara reached the child first and covered her, taking the force of his shoulder against her back. Her knee struck stone again. Luca pinned his uncle against the wall, while Adrian restrained the wounded arm. "You would destroy our name for a hairdresser and a child." Vittorio spat. Luca's expression did not change. "You destroyed it when you decided they were usable." He did not kill him. That refusal mattered more than vengeance. Luca brought Vittorio back to the chamber alive, where he could hear Bianca identify his voice and watch the laboratory director authenticate Elena's relationship to Marco. Thomas placed the red ledger beside Bianca's memory card and the photographed pages. The records supported each other. Renato's initial authorization, Vittorio's continued payments, Lake Arno transfers, Celeste's supply purchases, and Pier 9 custody. Neighborhood witnesses confirmed the recurring vehicles and guards. Adrian recognized his father's handwriting and disclosed the cash accounts used for the warehouse. The council elders could no longer treat the case as a private accusation. At 12:19 a.m., they stripped Vittorio and Salvatore of command, suspended the hereditary succession vote, and ordered every loyal unit to surrender. Luca insisted the evidence also go to state investigators. The decision exposed Renato's crime and threatened the Moretti businesses, exactly as Vittorio had predicted. Luca signed the release anyway. Vittorio stared at him. "You will have nothing." Luca looked across the chamber at Mara and Elena. "Then whatever remains will be chosen." Before dawn, police took Vittorio, Celeste, and Salvatore into custody under warrants supported by kidnapping, attempted murder, and conspiracy evidence. Adrian agreed to cooperate and relinquished control of Pier 9. The waterfront crews accepted a temporary council of captains rather than begin a war. When the mansion finally quieted, Luca found Mara sitting on the east stair while a medic rewrapped her knee. Elena slept with her head in Mara's lap. "The reward has been withdrawn," he said. "That isn't the same as safety." "No, but it is the first honest thing my family has given you." Mara looked at his bandaged shoulder, the seal no longer around his neck, and the empty space where certainty had once stood between them. "What happens to you now?" "I keep my promise. I leave your block if you ask." She considered him for a long moment. "Ask me when neither of us is bleeding." Consequences did not arrive cleanly. The Moretti shipping companies spent months under investigation. 2 waterfront alliances collapsed, and Luca sold his private club to pay legal claims for families harmed by Vittorio's roots. He testified to his father's role without protecting the family legend. Some captains called it betrayal. Others began bringing their disputes to elected representatives rather than a hereditary chair. Vittorio remained in custody awaiting trial. Celeste accepted a plea, and Salvatore admitted arranging the attack on Elina's vehicle. Adrian provided account records and never asked to inherit his father's power. Elina moved into a quiet house with Rosa, 2 female security officers, and a court-appointed child advocate. No one announced her as an heir. She attended school under her mother's surname and visited Bianca during recovery. Some nights she still slept with the light on. Some mornings she refused to let anyone brush her hair. Mara never forced her. Choice became part of every small routine. The salon reopened 6 weeks after the shooting. Without Luca's name on its window, Mara restored her mother's photograph, but left one fine crack visible. June returned on reduced hours. The neighboring shopkeepers formed their own association, chaired by Mara, and prohibited armed guards inside any business. Luca honored that rule. He came alone on a rainy Tuesday after closing, wearing a dark coat over a black shirt. His left shoulder had healed enough for ordinary movement, though he still avoided, lifting the arm above his head. The tattoos across his hands were familiar now, not because Mara trusted the world they represented, but because she had seen those hands release power when holding it would have been easier. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. "I was told. Appointments are the only messages this building accepts safely." Mara tried not to smile and failed slightly. "What service?" "A haircut." Nothing coded. He sat in her chair. For a man who had commanded rooms with silence, allowing someone to stand behind him was an act of naked trust. Mara fastened the cape around his neck, careful of the tattoos and the healing edge of his shoulder. "You threatened me the first time you came in," she said. "I remember every word." "Good. Regret is useless if it becomes amnesia. I am not asking you to forget." She lifted her red-handled scissors, the real pair, recovered from beneath the reception counter where she had set them during the attack. Their blades caught the warm salon light. Luca met her eyes in the mirror. "You told me to ask, when neither of us was bleeding. Your shoulder? Closed. Your knee? Annoying, but closed." He waited. Mara set down the comb. "Ask. May I stay in your life? Not above it, not around it with guards, and not because I owe you. I don't know yet what my life is without the chair. I would like to learn where you can see me doing it." The request contained no mansion, title, or promise that danger had vanished. It offered uncertainty, which was more honest than protection spoken as possession. "You may stay," Mara said. "If you understand that my salon is mine, Elina is not a bridge between us, and love does not purchase obedience." His gaze remained restrained, but something in it softened. "I understand the terms. Those are boundaries. Luca, not terms. Then I will learn the language." She finished the haircut. When she removed the cape, he did not reach for her until she stepped between his knees and rested her hands on his shoulders. His right hand settled gently at her broad waist. Waiting once more, she kissed him first. Elina arrived the next afternoon with Rosa and asked for the black dye to be removed. Mara explained that stripping 4 years of color would take several appointments and could damage the hair if rushed. Elina considered the choice and asked to begin with one small hidden section. Mara mixed a gentle remover while Luca waited outside with coffee. Respecting the rule against guards and business inside the salon, the first strand emerged not bright or perfect, but warm chestnut, the color Elina remembered from a photograph of her mother. She touched it and cried without fear. Months later, the remaining black had gradually faded. Elina chose a shoulder-length cut that exposed the crescent birthmark behind her ear. She no longer needed it hidden, and no one was allowed to turn it into a crown. Luca never reclaimed the hereditary chair. He helped convert the legitimate shipping operations into a worker-managed company, and accepted that some people would always judge his past more harshly than his reform. Mara did not defend him from consequences. She watched what he did with them. Their love grew while closing the salon, helping Elena with homework, and sitting together when old fear returned. Luca still entered rooms like a dangerous man. With Mara, he learned to knock. One evening, Elena swept a crescent of chestnut hair from the floor and asked whether the repaired photograph would always show its crack. Mara looked at Luca, who was replacing a loose hinge beneath the third shampoo chair, the passage permanently sealed by the city, this time from both sides. "Yes," she said, "the crack is part of what happened. It just doesn't decide what the picture means." Luca stood and offered her his uninjured hand. Mara took it because she wanted to, not because danger required it. Outside, the neighborhood lights came on one shop at a time. Inside, Elena laughed amid ordinary noise, and no locked door remained between those who chose to stay.